Good morning. Today we're going to be talking about lesson 1.2 for advanced math. This is going to be on solving multi-step equations. So the thing to remember is when we're solving multi-step equations, we use the same methods, such as balancing the equation as we did with lesson 1, just this time with more steps. So we're going to use what is called inverse operations to isolate the variable or get the variable by itself. What we mean by inverse operations, we mean opposites. So for instance, the opposite of adding is to subtract, and the opposite of dividing would be to be multiplying. So we're going to use those inverse operations to get the variable by itself. The other thing we need to know is that we have talked in the past, or at least in the past years, you've learned about the order of operations. In order to solve equations, we're actually going to work backwards. So you're going to start with the adding and subtracting step and then move on to the multiplying and dividing step. So using what you know so far, I want you to go ahead and take a look at numbers 1 through 3, pause the video for a few minutes, give those a try, and then come back when you're ready and we're going to talk about those together. All right, now let's give these a try together. So if you look at number 1, it says negative 3z plus 1 equals 7. So we're going to start with that adding and subtracting step. So the opposite of adding 1 would be to subtract 1. So since we're balancing the scale, we're going to do that on both sides of the equal sign. So if we subtract 1 from both sides, positive 1 and a negative 1 cancel. So we're left with negative 3z equals 7 minus 1 is 6. So now negative 3 and z are being multiplied. So the opposite of multiplying by negative 3 would be to divide by negative 3. So now we need to divide by negative 3 on both sides of the equal sign. When we do this side cancels since they are inverse operations. 6 divided by negative 3. Well, we know that 6 divided by 3 is 2, and a positive divided by a negative is a negative answer. So we have z equals negative 2. Now on number 2, we have 1 half x minus 9 equals negative 25. The opposite of subtracting 9 would be to add 9. So we're going to add 9 to both sides. Negative 9 and a positive 9 cancel. So we're left with 1 half x equals negative 25 plus 9. Now these have opposite signs, so we must subtract. 25 take away 9 is 16. And we keep the sign of the larger number. Now 1 half is being multiplied by x. Now we know that the opposite of multiplication is to divide, but we should kind of think back to what we've learned in the past and realize that we can't divide by a fraction. Instead, we have to multiply by something called the reciprocal. So we're going to flip this fraction upside down and multiply by 2 over 1 on both sides. And when we do this, 2 times 1 is 2, and 1 times 2 is 2. So 2 over 2 is 1. So that would just have this cancel out because x and 1x are the same thing. It's called the imaginary 1. We always know that there's one of them if there's no coefficient in front of it. So on the other side here, whole numbers have a denominator of 1. So negative 16 times 2. 16 times 2 is 32. Negative times a positive is a negative. 1 times 1 is 1. And negative 32 over 1 can reduce to simply negative 32. Now, if we look at the next one, we have negative 4n minus 8n plus 17 equals 23. My first suggestion here would be to simplify. So negative 4n minus 8n, they have the same sign in front of them, so we add them and keep that sign. 4 and 8 is 12, so this will be negative 12n plus 17 equals 23. Now we can go ahead and subtract 17 to use that inverse operation. So when we do this, we have negative 12n equals 23 take away 17 is 6. Since negative 12 is being multiplied by n, we're going to divide by negative 12 on both sides. Here we know that a positive divided by a negative is a negative, and 6 divided by 12, or 6 over 12, can be reduced to 1/2. So our answer would be n equals negative 1/2. Now I want you to pause your video again and take a look at numbers 4 and 5. We're going to need to use the distributive property to solve these. Go ahead and give those a try and then come back when you're finished. Okay, now let's take a look at number 4. So we talked about needing to use the distributive property. So when there's a number directly in front of the parentheses, that means we are going to distribute or give it to everything inside. So we do that by multiplying. So I like to draw my lines or my arrows kind of reminding me where I need to be going. So negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Plus 5x equals 9. Now I would go ahead and combine like terms. So negative 3x plus 5x. They have opposite signs, so we subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. 5x minus 3x is 2x. Keeping the sign of the larger number would be positive. And then we can write everything down on the next line to continue. So now we're back to kind of the beginning of this lesson. The opposite or inverse operation of subtracting 6 would be to add 6. So we're going to add 6 to both sides. We get 2x equals 9 plus 6 is 15. The opposite of multiplying by 2 would be to divide by 2. So we get x equals, you could either say 7.5 or 7.5. Now on number 5, we have 5 plus 1.5 times the quantity of d minus 1 equals 0.5. So again, we're going to distribute this into the parentheses. 1.5 times d is 1.5d. 1.5 times negative 1 is negative 1.5. Now, if we combine like terms, 5 minus 1.5, that is 3.5. So we have 1.5d plus 3.5 equals 0.5. Again, the opposite of adding is to subtract. So subtracting 3.5 on both sides. Remember when you're adding and subtracting decimals that the decimal must line up. So here we have opposite signs, so we must subtract them. 3.5 minus 0.5 will give me 3. I need to keep the sign of the larger number, which would be negative. So now the opposite of multiplying by 1.5 on both sides would be to divide. So I would end up with d equals negative divided by a positive is a negative. 3 divided by 1/2, or 1 and 1/2, sorry, is 2. So our answer would be d equals negative 2. Now I want you to pause your video again and take a look at number 6. It's talking about the mean, which is the average of something. So you're averaging those numbers to find the answer. Okay, so on number 6, it's wanting us to find the mean or the average to find the 4th test score. So here it gives us the first 3 test scores of 88, 92, and 87. The 4th test score is unknown, so we're going to use a variable. Now, in order to find the average, you're going to add all of the information and divide it by the number of pieces. So since we're talking about 4 test scores, we're going to divide by 4. We want an average of 90. So that's what our equal is going to be. So we need it to be equal to 90. Now, since all of this information is being divided by 4, the opposite would be to multiply by 4. So you're going to multiply by 4 on both sides to begin. When we do this, multiplying and dividing will cancel. So we're left with 88 plus 92 plus 87 plus x equals 90 times 4 is 360. The next thing you'll want to do is you're going to add these three numbers. Now, when you add those three numbers, you're going to get 267. So since 267 is a positive number, the opposite would be to subtract it. So we're going to subtract 267 from both sides. And we would get x is equal to, when you borrow to subtract, 10 take away 7 is 3, and 15 take away 6 is 9. So this student, or you, would have to score 93% on the fourth test to have a test average of 90. Now, when you go on to look at the following two problems, they're talking about triangles. It's wanting you to find the missing angle. So one thing that is factual that we know about triangles is that the three angles, they always have three angles, are going to add up to 180 degrees. So when you're writing your equation, you need to set it equal to 180. So go ahead and try and give those two a shot and then come back when you're finished. All right, now that you've given those two a try, we're going to go ahead and go over them together. So in the first one, you have n plus 42 equals 180. So you can start by simplifying. N plus n is 2n. The opposite or inverse of adding 42 would be to subtract. Remember that we're balancing the scale, so whatever you do on one side, you must do on the other. 180 minus 42 is 138. And then we're going to go ahead, the opposite of multiplying by 2 is to divide by 2. And when you divide by 2 here, 138 divided by 2 is 69. So each of those missing angles would be worth that. So when it's asking you what your three angles of the polygon would be, you would have 69, 69, and 42. Now, if we look at the next one, x plus 10 plus x plus 5 equals 180. Here again, you want to start by simplifying. So x plus x is 3x. And 10 plus 5 is 15. So we're going to start by subtracting 15. And we have 3x equals 165. Now we can go ahead and divide by 3 on each side. So when we do this, we get 55 degrees. Now if it's wanting all three angles of the polygon, we know that x is 55, but x plus 10 would be 55 plus 10, or 65 degrees. And the third angle, x plus 5, would be 55 plus 5, or 60 degrees. Now, if we wanted to go back and check our work, we could add these three up and make sure that they add up to 180.